So today we're going to talk about footwork on the two-handed backhand, and what we're going to look at specifically are the two options that you have when pushed wide in the court. Now certainly we want to understand that regardless of what you like to teach or what you like to do when it comes to your footwork in certain situations, we also want to consider what kinds of things do the best pros in the world have in common. And definitely as we take a look at the video here, you'll notice that when the great two-handers on tour get pushed wide in the court, typically they will do one of two things with their footwork. Obviously, you can talk about semantics when it comes to what you would rather call this method or call that method, and you can argue about when to use one method or the other. But what we want to accomplish here in this video is a simple message, and that is that when players who possess the best two-handed backhands in the world get pushed wide in the court, they will choose either an open stance or some close variation of that, or what I'm going to call the cross step, which is a variation of the closed stance. Now, I would be naive to think that, you have to do things in a certain way, that this is a game of black and white or right and wrong concepts, but I think what we will see in this video over and over again from a wide range of pros is that having some specific methodology to what you do and giving yourself a couple of options in certain situations or certain scenarios can definitely make your life easier out there on the court. Certainly, as we are seeing with all these different pros, is that they are all sort of taking these concepts with the open stance, as we're seeing here, or with the cross step, as we will see in just a second, and making them their own. And that's what can be valuable in watching the pros. They all do things a little differently, and they all have their own little idiosyncrasies, but they also have some important things in common. And the footwork on the wide backhand is definitely an area where the pros seem to be choosing some common ground, so to speak, or rather executing similar footwork technique when they're hitting their shots. So that's the terminology that I'm using here. And of course, feel free to use whatever terminology that you want when discussing it with your players or your coaches or both. Now, what we're looking at first is, of course, as you can see, the open stance two-hander. Generally speaking, the open stance for a right-handed player on the backhand means that they step into the shot with their left foot, or for lefties like Nadal or Verdasco, it will be the right foot. So by stepping into the shot with the outside foot and then loading with the outside leg before contact, the open stance can typically make it easier to hit the ball in these situations, and of course it helps with recovery as well. And from my viewpoint, players can use this method of footwork with the open stance on their two-hander, not only when they get pushed wide, but also when they get pushed back. I think what we all want to understand is that choosing the open stance when pushed wide or pushed back means that it makes it possible to turn your shoulders all the way through the shot. Since the pros with the best two-handers typically will look to use almost a 180-degree shoulder turn from preparation to follow-through, using the open stance when pulled wide or pushed back makes that shoulder turn possible. What we'll later see with the cross step is that this is basically a closed stance backhand, except instead of dragging the back foot up to the front, which is what normally happens, players when using the cross step will bring their back foot around to the side. Now, why do they do that, you ask? Well, it's for the same reason that players choose the open stance, and that is to make it easier to turn their shoulders all the way throughout the shot, that 180-degree shoulder turn that we were talking about. Because while using the cross steps, players are forced to step at an angle, or rather at a diagonal toward the sideline. If they just drag their back foot up, then they wouldn't be able to complete that 180-degree shoulder turn, and instead they'd be forced to stay sideways throughout the course of the stroke, thus making it harder to hit out in front, harder to follow through, and pretty much harder to make the shot go where you want it to go. So think about using one of these two methods when you get pushed wide on your backhands. And coaches, it may be beneficial to think about whether or not your students have good discipline with their footwork on wide backhands. Maybe they do, and maybe some don't. If they don't, then a smarter player will hit wide to their backhand and see their lack of balance and inability to get in position for their shot, and they'll see that as a weakness. But one thing to consider also is that these ideas really don't need to be exclusive for only the most advanced players. I mean, I learned the cross step when I was 10 and the open stance when I was 11, and looking back, I would hardly call myself a prodigy at that age. But having these concepts, instilled in me as a young kid gave me a better foundation with my footwork overall. And certainly my footwork was one major aspect of, or reason for, the success I later had in life. And as we continue to watch a few more cross steps in this video, what you want to continue to watch is how they step in to what initially looks like a traditional closed stance, but except in this case, on these wide backhands, they'll swing that left foot around. The right-handers will to their left. And here Nadal is swinging that back foot around in very much the same way. And it enables that more complete shoulder turn that allows those guys and these girls to hit the ball all the way out in front, which gives them that balance, that control, and that shot-making ability. So again, to sum up what we've seen here today, we're looking at the wide backhand footwork and how either an open stance or the variation of the closed stance that I'm calling the cross step here facilitates that shot-making ability.